Hi, everybody. I'm Scott.
And I'm Luke.
And I'm Jonathan.
And tonight we're going to start off by telling you something new about ourselves. Like, I got my first haircut after quarantine.
I am currently ill. And this is my daughter's mug. But I'm using it because she's a toddler and this thing is huge.
I have a beard. I got nothing, guys. What do you want from me?
Well, that'll work. Tonight we have decided to try and tackle the topic of acting. So I will be pretending to be myself for the entire night. Luke will try and pretend not to be sick. And Jonathan will pretend to be awake.
I don't know. I think I might pretend to be more sick than normal.
Ah, I see.
You're gonna lean into it. That's not very hard. You gotta pretend like you're not sick at all, Luke. I don't want any sniffles. I don't want any coughs. All right, get your crap together.
If I was to eat a raw bison liver, I'd throw up too. Where's my Oscar?
Oh man. Okay, inner peace.
For those of you who may not know, that's a reference to the movie The Revenant and the reference to the honest trailer for the movie The Revenant, which, if you don't know, you can look into that.
Link down below. Wow, why is my every time we transition to me, I'm totally pixely.
That's kind of weird, but you're the tech guy, so I'm sure you'll fix it in post.
Yeah. This is something that you fix in post. Yeah, data streams.
Clearly, as guys who are all more focused on the behind-the-scenes stuff in the film production world, we're going to take a little bit of a different perspective than most people, but I do want you to understand kind of where we're coming from. So I myself once tried my hand at acting and actually did a lot of stage plays through church and some other acting friends as I was growing up through middle school and even into high school. I never got paid to do it, but absolutely loved being on stage and pretending to be somebody else. I always had a lot of fun with it, but quickly realized that in my high school acting classes that I was the chump in the room and would probably never make a name for myself in acting. It had been a pretty serious consideration of mine for some time to pursue acting, but I'm ultimately glad that I did not. Jonathan, Luke, do you guys have any experience with acting?
Well, first, why are you glad?
Why am I glad?
Yeah, you're I'm glad I didn't go. Why?
I think there's just a lot of stress in it, especially unless you're a big name. Acting is one of those things that you're scraping by, fighting tooth and nail, clawing, backbiting, trying to get your foot up in any way possible. And it's just one of those, it's got to wear on you. And even though I was doing the fun stuff where I knew I'd get a part, up until I tried out for one or two plays in high school and didn't get a even a chorus role, as I would call it. I really think that it was easy, it was fun, it was something to do, it was put your name on the list and we'll make it work kind of a thing versus you actually have to be good to do it kind of a thing. So from my perspective, there's definitely a craft, but there's also a particular lifestyle that you have to live as an actor, fighting for everything you're given. But going back to you guys, do you guys have any experience with acting?
Yes, I do. Actually, way back in the day, how many tales of woe do you want? Okay, when I was a wee child, our church was putting on the performance of Adam and Eve, like a show, and so they're like, you can be any animal you want. And I was like, oh man, I want to be a condor. They've got this 6-foot wingspan. They're super awesome. And the poor little church lady who was going to make all the costumes was like, a condor, I will see what I can do for you. And so we show up for dress rehearsal. And much to my horror, I am a chicken, which is nowhere near a condor. But that somehow didn't destroy my ability to like be on stage. I then went on to be Francis of Assisi in a show. That was pretty cool. I definitely had this long monologue, which I said way too fast because, you know, you're trying to like remember it all, right? So that's a thing. In high school, I got to be the second cook in Talk Tooth, which is all in rhyme. And so I ended up writing myself some extra lines, which I then did in the last show. But I got on stage, said my 2 lines that I, you know, were written for me. And then I like was going to go into the rest of mine. And I spaced everything. I didn't even know what play we were doing all of a sudden. Like I knew nothing. And of course it's all in rhyme scheme, right? So like, what are you going to do? And somehow I bumbled my way through that. And, you know, my co-star who was on stage, who actually had lines or whatever, was help me get through that. And later, one of my teachers said, well, that's why we don't write new lines. And another one of my teachers said, well, I couldn't tell that anything was truly wrong, except that you like suddenly went white as a sheet. And I was like, oh no, what happened? So yeah, that's some of my background in acting. And then I tend to give myself little bit parts in my films, because that way I don't have to try and find another actor.
Yes, logical. I have a little bit of acting experience, but I would say it's closer to where you were, Scott, in the sense of, productions where in most cases a role was guaranteed or even required. In high school, we had a music and like art or something class that you'd think I would love, but like I don't recall having many fond memories. One of the things we had to do is we had to put on a play. And we did it. We ended up doing a murder mystery dinner theater sort of thing. And I was able to talk my way into, because I had to have a part, because everyone had to have a part. And my class is very small, so all the parts were fairly significant. So I was able to talk my way into being the character with the most gravitas, who's not in the script for the most amount of time. So you have to show up, make a big impression, and then get the crap out of there and not have a bunch of lines to have memorized. So I was able to talk my way into that, and also into being quote unquote co-director, because I just wanted to be more on that side of things. Anyway, I've done that. Like church musicals. I mean, I guess there was plenty of other kids who I guess auditioned for parts, and that's what I'll say. I don't know that I've ever been any good at real acting, like dramatic, serious. Hey, like he's emotive, like he's a real person, he's a character, he's really, this is gonna be sad or anything like that. No, I suck at that. Where I really seem to excel is potentially character acting or bigger funny roles, or like something with an accent, or just like that gravitas, like something that's just very big and maybe even one note to some extent. I can do that in spades. I can kind of make you feel that note, or at least I've done that in very amateur, high school lower productions, and occasionally in a short film or or other work. So I have some experience in that. I have more experience trying to direct actors in dramatic ways. I did go through an acting class or directing class where you had to do some acting. And the one note I got after doing my scene was, your eyebrows are the best eyebrows in the biz, which just meant that I apparently acted with my eyebrows and nothing else happened. So what do you know?
Yeah, I want to see some of that eyebrow acting.
I mean, we just see it every day. Just got
it. All right. So, as we're watching movies, the thing that we love talking about, what are the things that you focus on and say, "Ooh, that was a good acting performance"?
I feel like acting, in a lot of ways, feels to me like editing. I shouldn't notice it. If I'm noticing it, then you're probably doing it wrong, because instead of being believable, you're doing something else. Like instead of me being like, this is this moment, I'm sitting there going, what's wrong with you? Right. And this is why, like, and this might be heresy or whatever for like film, but like Daniel Day-Lewis, I have never thought of him. Like I've only watched a few of his films, but every movie where they're like, this guy was amazing, I'm like, I don't believe a moment of anything. He's just playing a character on screen. And So this clearly makes me a terrible judge of actors, but like, I feel like he's doing something. Whereas someone like Guy Pearce, I'm like, I believe you no matter what you're doing, even if you're in a terrible movie. Like, I just believe you. And so, I don't know. I put Guy Pearce over Daniel Day-Lewis.
Interesting.
Shocking.
Very interesting. I think that, well, just like every part of the art form, right? It's collaborative. So like there are things that's hard to say. Is that the performance? Is that the writing? Is that the directing? Is that the cinematography? Like, usually it should be all things involved. And I do have a certain tendency to be like, yeah, in many cases, I do think that the acting, I should not be thinking about acting, if that makes any sense, right? But I should be able to come out of the movie and think back and say, that was a good performance. I should be able to do that, potentially. I think that there is something about like the really big cool acting things are things like there's a moment with no dialogue, and there's obviously they're trying to do everything they can with this camera and the setup of the scene and everything. But if I can look into an actor's eyes, I don't see an actor, I see the performance, or I'm thinking about what the character's thinking about, or I believe I can see what they're thinking in a sense, because that's how strongly that actor is doing a good performance of what that character is in that moment. If I can sort of see it in their eyes, I can see it in their face and their actions, that they are like this makes this whole thing richer. I can kind of see. And then, okay, another way of saying this, people talk about Star Wars and say, hey, I really like the line, the Clone Wars or whatever, because it makes the world bigger, right? It makes it this thing that happened somewhere else. Not a lot of explanation. It just happened, and the world's just really big. There's things outside of the screen that make the world feel more alive. I think that acting can kind of do that too, where you look at a character and it sort of, you can see depth that you're not expecting. And that way the world is actually bigger. The world is actually richer because there is something more going on there. Even though you may never hear it or see it again in the movie, you saw it then, and it's more. And it doesn't feel like off note, like that doesn't make any sense for what we're doing or that character or anything like that. So there's definitely a few things that come to mind. Yeah, if you're the kind of person that's like Oscar baiting and like ate raw bison liver, then I'm, I don't care at all. Daniel Day-Lewis is an interesting thing you bring up, Luke, because there are performances of his that I enjoy. I enjoy his performance of the butcher guy or whatever in Gangs of New York, the gang leader dude. Did you ever see that movie, Luke?
I did. That was a long time ago. That was not one of the ones I was thinking of. But yeah.
I enjoy his performance because it's such a caricature as well as a character. It's so big and larger than life, and it's fun to watch, I think. And so in that way, I also think it's fun to watch character actors or to watch people who can, even though you may be thinking the entire time or you can see it more easily that you're giving a performance, there is a fun, too, in sort of a pageantry or like knowing it's a performance at a certain type of performance. Like that's just fun to watch somebody ham it up or fun to watch somebody be larger than life. Anyway, those are some basic thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough for me to think about like an acting performance and not think, as you guys have mentioned, about all the other aspects that go into it. I mean, I actually had a professor in film school this was in my editing class, so of course he was basically like, the editor makes the acting performance. The actor is nothing without the editor.
Well, sure.
And, I mean, there is some truth to that, and Luke,
yes.
you definitely pointed at it already. But to a certain extent, then, like, why are there some actors and actresses that we consider better than others? And like, I can't think of a particular reason other than, this actor happened to be in this movie at this time and somehow made an impression, and people were like, oh, that's a face that I remember. So now that I'm doing this other movie, that face would be perfect for this movie. And to a certain extent, I feel like Harrison Ford, for as big as he is and as much as he's done, and probably for as good of an actor as he is, he was in the right place at the right time and had the right face for George Lucas, and the rest is kind of history.
Right, because he was like a carpenter on set, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it is kind of funny to think about why. Honestly, I have to ask the question: why does anybody like actors or actresses? But when you start to think about why is there sort of star power, or why are there people who really love this actor and not this actor? Is it really just preference? Is it really about performance? Why is it that Daniel Day-Lewis is considered to be one of the premier actors, right? One of the best performers? Is that a behind the scenes thing more? Is that really truly stuff you can see on the screen? And I think that there's, I think that we get star power as a typical audience member. I think we get star power confused with good acting. Like you just said, Scott, that, you like somebody. They have a face you like. They have mannerisms you find funny. They have a charisma that you are attuned to and really like. And so whenever you see them show up in a movie, you are happy to see that because it's familiar and you like that experience. And in fact, you get really upset when like the comedic actor goes and does a drama role, and you're like, that's not Robin Williams. No, it's not Robin Williams. It's not my Robin Williams. Not that
Those
guy.
are some of Robin Williams' best roles, though, or is when he's
like 1 Hour
the
Photo
guy.
Do you see
Brilliant performance, 1 Hour Photo. I actually saw that in the theater when I was back in college and went, I was expecting something totally else because it's Robin Williams, right? I had no clue really what I was going to. My friend was like, hey, it's a Robin Williams in this movie. You want to go see it? Sure. Sounds great.
1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams. That's going to be a hoot. He's just going to be like a photo developer making all these wisecracks. It's going to be crazy. Is he like become a different character at some point? Is he like take on some drag or something? No, he's a serial killer.
Yeah. Yeah, straight
Spoilers.
up.
Yeah. It's not that. Well, anyway.
See, but that's where I like, Will Ferrell in Stranger Than Fiction,
but that's
I
Dead
like
Poets Society, right? Like that's every comedic actor, Jim Carrey, Truman Show,
Yes.
I'm sure you were about this, like every comedic actor who's made it into the other side of the acting, right, has that role where they had to go in and be like, no, seriously though, I can act and I don't want to hear any more about this. I have to be in comedies only crap. It's just that I just meant to say that with Robin Williams, you've got sort of two sides. He was known as the comedic guy, obviously. He was also known from Dead Poets Society and other dramatic roles as being still like a good guy, like this person that you looked up to or loved or was sort of sincere in a way that we really loved. 1 Hour Photo is the most Goodwill Hunting. 1 Hour Photo is this complete departure for Robin Williams in the sense of, yeah, he's a serial killer. He's a creepy, creepy guy. And if you love Robin Williams, the star, and you love what you've experienced before, watching that movie, it's already a disturbing movie, but watching that, you don't care about his performance. You just hate it because you don't like, it's very easy for people to hate that performance, I think, not because he gave a bad performance, but because they didn't want to watch Robin Williams be a creepy serial killer.
Well, but honestly, if you go back and look at his performance in that movie, it's not where I'm like pointing out. The only reason I'm noticing it is because it isn't the norm for him, right?
Right. But star power versus acting, that's all I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Do you like other actors? Trying to go back to that question. Do you like other actors more than others because you like the star power, you like the charisma, you like the good feelings you get because of the roles? Do you like the characters that they play, right? That kind of thing. Or is it that you actually like a person's ability to perform and take on other roles, right? Like, do you actually like that? Or do you like that Robin Williams always makes you laugh? If you really like Robin Williams as an actor, in a sense, his performing ability, you will at least have respect for 1 Hour Photo. You might have even an appreciation for it, even if you don't like the movie, because you will see that he gave a good performance. But if you only want Robin Williams, the comedian, or the sincere, awesome, heartwarming guy, then you don't like 1 Hour Photo at all, even though he's in it, right? Just because you don't like his performance, because you don't want him to be that person. You don't want to be with that character. You want something else. So I'm just trying to say there's a distinction between star power and like the characters people play and then this idea of actually performing, acting performance, and what makes it. That's why like the dramatic actors are always doing something weird, I think, in a sense, because that gives them the freedom to always be the dramatic actor. They can't get, but then they get into this other rut of like, well, he's always doing the weird thing. It's always like
Helena Bonham Carter. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I like about Guy Pearce, why I like him so much, not only is he in Memento, which I like, but also in a lot of his movies, I don't know who he is until like looking back or halfway into the movie. I'm like, oh, there's Guy Pearce. Whoa. So the fact that he becomes someone else in these movies, I like that a lot. On the other hand, like, Denzel Washington, I'm like, dude, anything you do, I'll watch it, man. Like, let's do it. But then you go back to like Mississippi, whatever, like one of his way early ones, and you're like, well, you got a lot better. Like, oh my goodness.
Right. And there is this element for actors that they get the stars get the opportunity to choose their roles. So I have a better sense of I'm liking you because you're choosing better roles versus, someone who maybe doesn't have that star power and they're just trying to get a role period so they can get their foot in the door and they don't have the opportunity to choose their roles. I mean, there's going to be a lot of bad roles that you choose just because you want work or you need work. And to a certain extent, I don't have the option to like you based on the roles that you choose.
Well, okay. Random impromptu case study. How do you all feel about Tom Hanks?
I mean, he's certainly done a lot of fun movies that I enjoy and seems to be able to play different characters really well. I mean, he has to be, in my opinion, one of the better actors that I've seen throughout my lifetime.
The movies that he's in are not my favorite, so I don't go revisit those. So I've seen a lot of Tom Hanks movies. I'm not pulling up any kind of specific memories about it. Like, there's some good stuff. One day I just started running, something jumped up and bit me in the butt. Like there's some stuff there, but like, yeah, I don't have a good enough handle on that to have an opinion.
There's enough different roles that Tom Hanks has played that I can look at and go, oh gosh, he really did do that well. And I think one of the best examples I have is actually one of his more recent films, about where he played Mr. Rogers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of go into a movie with Tom Hanks going, ooh, I get to watch Tom Hanks. And as I'm watching this movie, it wasn't so much that I was watching Tom Hanks as much as I was going, whoa, I'm watching Mr. Rogers. Like, he put in the time and the effort to become Mr. Rogers in this movie. And I think it honestly may be one of his best acting jobs he's ever done.
I'm curious to bring it back to what are the qualifications of a good performance, or what is good acting, or what do you want out of a performance? And as you bring up this idea of, Tom Hanks being somebody that really existed and that we have footage of, Mr. Rogers in this case, and you're seeing Mr. Rogers. When you say that makes me think of Jim Carrey doing Andy Kaufman. Who is it? Is it like
something like that? Name? Yeah,
Andy Kaufman. I'm sorry if you're like, it's obviously this. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't really care. But it's the movie like Man on the Moon or something like that is what it's called. Yep. And the whole thing is the behind the scenes of that film is nuts because Jim Carrey was basically method acting as that person, and that person was crazy in a lot of ways. Would be demanding, riotous, strange, weird, and Jim Carrey was nailing it. He was nailing that performance all the time. And there's some documentary, I forget which one we watched, where it was basically the director called up Jim Carrey and said, look, I need you to tone it down. I need you to actually show up at the set on time. I need to talk to Jim, okay? I don't need to talk to Andy right now. I need to talk to Jim. Hey, Jim, I need you to show up to work tomorrow and then do the performance. And Jim said, well, here's the thing. This is Jim, and here's the thing. Either, like, I can go on set and pretend to be him, and I can do that normally. Or you let me be him, and I can't control what he does. And the director said, fine, you can be him, and let the movie go. And
yeah, that behind the scenes is complete, like, so mind-blowingly crazy. Like, yeah, it's great. If you like insane film experiences. Whew.
But I guess I'm just trying to get at, there's so many different things an actor can try to take their hand at. There's genre filmmaking. There's being the star of the movie as opposed to often being a side character. There's obviously character acting. There's television versus movies, and what's the difference there? You know.
Yeah, and I'll admit it's a lot easier for me to look at a film that is based on a person in real life and understand how good of an actor someone is. Your example of Jim Carrey, for instance, is a scenario where I look at a lot of the films that he's done and I go, okay, he's over the top, he's got his mannerisms that people like, but is he really a good actor? And you don't see it in most of his films until you get something like Man on the Moon, where he just knocks it out of the park, where he is that person and he's not Jim anymore. And you realize that, okay, maybe he actually is a really good actor.
But let's talk about some of the bigger performances, like Michael Jordan in Space Jam playing Michael Jordan. Now, that's one of the most iconic acting performances of all time, right?
No.
I've never seen that movie.
You're fine. You're fine. I think that most people hate that movie, actually. It's only us kids from the 90s who grew up with it that have some sort of nostalgic feeling. If you try to watch it again, you're kind of like... I jest. But again, what does acting bring to the whole thing? Obviously, you need a performer to get to play the role to like have any story whatsoever, right? But what is it that an actor or actress, like, what do they bring to the story? What do they really do?
I think that really good actors, like every other role in film, being this collaborative thing, get to know who the character is and push that character even further than what the writer and the director have, because they are owning it. And I recently watched Joseph Gordon-Levitt's TED Talk, and it's great about attention and how he loves like the focus of going on and performing and how that enables him to give and, you know, kind of react to other things. And it's great. But there's something about bringing that character to life and adding your own life to it that I think makes acting this really powerful addition to the movie.
I'm horribly curious to watch that TED Talk. Can you link that below, Luke?
Oh, yeah.
Sweet.
Link below.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt is one of those actors that like sneaks up in a lot of movies that I really enjoy. I might even have to recommend one of his films later, even though I was planning to recommend something else. So yeah, I mean, there's some of those films that, you know, you see these certain actors do, and maybe they're not huge, even though Joseph Gordon-Levitt certainly has his following, but they just kind of pop up in movies that you like to see too. So there's this weirdness of, for me and him, when it comes to him, of like, he might not be the biggest name in the world, but I really enjoy the roles that he picks, and he tends to pick roles that are movies that I enjoy. So we've talked about this concept of star power with actors, and on the other hand, you get actors that just pick certain roles and it feels like they just understand you because they're doing movies that you would like.
Well, and then there's just celebrity crushes, right? Like, I love Camilla Belle, and like all of her movies are pretty terrible. Like, it's the case, but like I like her a lot.
I'm also wondering about the gap between potentially, everyone's got their own opinion, obviously, and I always hate on the Oscars every chance I get, but there's this dichotomy, right? Of like, I remember it'll always stand in my mind because I thought it was really funny. Adrian Brody won the Oscar one year, I believe, for The Pianist, which my old man watched. He watched The Pianist, and he had his feelings on it. And then we watched The Village, which Adrian Brody's also in, but in that movie he is a side character. And in the very beginning of the movie The Village, that character, everyone's quiet at a table because this noise is coming from the woods and it's creepy, and everyone's quiet except for Adrian Brody, who is essentially mentally handicapped, special ed, and he just starts clapping, getting all crazy about the horn. And my dad, which may have been a little now potentially politically incorrect or something to say because the character is special ed, but like whatever, it was hilarious because it was this idea of that was more acting I just saw there than in the entire movie of The Pianist. Why was The Pianist the movie he won an Oscar for? What I can't see the acting that he did, or I can't see why he looked. In my dad's mind, it was he goes to the piano and he looks sad, and then he walks around and he looks sad. What is he doing? What is he doing that makes it a good performance? As opposed to, at least here, he's doing something that tells me something about the story that's different, right? He's doing something. So there's another question there too, as to what do you think people are actually interested in when it comes to acting? What makes good or bad choices? What is a good performance?
Well, and that reminds me of the Gosling effect, right? Like where he just
you're missing the slow zoom in.
Right, sorry. Let me try again to be Ryan Gosling.
Sorry, I probably ruined that.
You ruined the shot, Scott.
Oh man, I was laughing so hard.
But you were doing more acting than he was doing.
It's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is what's interesting too, of like what crews work together. Like, who do directors choose to work with and why? Like, what's that all about, right? It's who do you have around, who are your friends, who are your people. So you pull them in, which is why, JJ always has his people in his movies, and like, you can look at Rise of Skywalker and be like, oh, hi. So like there's all these factors that play into it. And if you watch my short films, then, you'll be like, oh, well, there's that person again. Right, because that's my friend who, when I call up, I'm like, hey, can you be in my movie? And they say, yeah. And cool. So that works. So there's even this relational part to it that makes the Hollywood machine continue to roll and independent films continue to roll, where certain people just get more playtime. And there's probably something about, again, what you were mentioning earlier, I think it was Jonathan, about, like once you've seen this person in this role, then everybody's thinking, oh, it needs to be in this role. Or was that you, Scott? Whatever. And so there's this idea of these people just got that opportunity, which then makes them more visible, which then makes them more of a star power, which then continues the wheel forward, right? So,
yeah. I mean, from my limited experience working in Hollywood, I will tell you that whoever, starts out with this script and is like, okay, we're making this movie, even from the standpoint of who do we want to get to be the director, there's a lot of, okay, what other movies have been made and what kind of director do we actually want to have? And I think that feeds into the acting a lot as well, where, okay, now we've got a director attached to this script. What kind of actor do we want attached to this script? And there's a lot of scripts that get made simply because of an actor that says, oh, I want to be a part of this project. And that ends up driving it forward. So, if you've got a name in Hollywood as an actor, you can get a movie made simply because you're going to be a part of it. And that's where we get a lot of bad movies from even really good actors, to be perfectly honest.
But then you also get passion projects, right? With like Greatest Showman and things like that, where somebody was like, I love this. I want to make it happen. So I'm going to work with people, right? But then you also have other things that are not that.
Well, and I keep going back to this idea of like, is good performing, as a good actor, someone who basically you really transforms from role to role, right? Isn't stuck in the typecasting, but actually. So I think of Joaquin Phoenix. I think of early Joaquin Phoenix when you had him in both Gladiator and Signs, and he was completely different characters. He's this sort of arrogant, pompous, broken, weak individual in Gladiator, and he's the almost exact opposite in Signs. This humble, quiet, actually very strong character in that movie, right? And you've got an actor who can transform. He is different people. You believe it. You will go with him, and so you may like him. He may have his quirks or whatever, but he's not. It's not the star power thing in the same sense of, oh, good, Jim Carrey's doing the Jim Carrey thing, or Will Smith is doing the Will Smith thing, or whatever it may be.
Interesting. I think I might be even more confused now about why I like certain actors than I was before we started this podcast.
Well, that is excellent. Sounds like something that we could talk about potentially on a future episode.
Maybe.
After we've thought about things.
On that note, gentlemen, it is time for us to provide some suggestions for our viewers. What would you recommend to our viewers?
I'm trying to think of a performance, like a really, really good performance to offer up as a recommendation. But it's hard. It's hard to come up with one right off the top of my head. I am thinking, I'm not sure I particularly love the movie, but I could start with that. If you want to see, I think one of Tom Hanks' more transformative roles, if you watch Captain Phillips, that's Tom Hanks like I've never seen Tom Hanks before or again. Not that I need to see it again, but I thought he definitely owned the role and was not Tom Hanks. He was that character. And particularly by the end of that movie, he does this one like kind of 5-minute little sequence that really, really performs something I thought very strongly that seems very real to me, and he nails it, I think, at least in a movie way of me believing it, understanding what that was, and understand the reality of that possibility. So Captain Phillips, if you want to see Tom Hanks be not Tom Hanks.
Along those lines, I will go with Count of Monte Cristo for Guy Pearce. I've only seen that movie once, so I don't know how good it is. But like, I keep talking about Guy Pearce this film, this episode. So we'll go with that one. There you go.
Cool.
Check it out.
And I am actually going to give you my Joseph Gordon-Levitt recommendations, and I could give you a list. The movie I always go back to, and I'm sure I've mentioned on this podcast before, is 10 Things I Hate About You. But if you actually want to see him act well, I think I really love him in a movie called 500 Days of Summer. It's a little romantic comedy, if you will, and I love the non-sequential cutting in the film. But it's interesting because you see the diversity in the emotions in the character he plays. So I think that's a really good acting job of his. And if you need something else that's a little more heartfelt, you can always go watch 50-50. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to see you next time.
Yes, we do.
Luke, are you feeling any better?
Oh, I was never sick. It was all just an act.